and asks you to use the graphs, and it's going to happen like this too. You're going to get some questions that are based on a physical graph where you would not have your graphing utility. You'll look at the graph and you'll answer the questions. And then the question at the end where it says to use the graph and then answer the questions, that's also going to happen. So that's how your test will start. Just like your quiz, you will start with the calculator portion. You will answer those questions, and then you will move on to the non-calculator portion, okay? So it says use the graph to answer the question. Find f of 2. F of 2 means go to where my x is 2 and find the corresponding y. The answer there should have been what? Good. Just the y is what you're answering. Number 2 says find domain and range. So domain, we're going as far left as we can and as far right as we can go. The domain here would be negative infinity to positive infinity. There's no breaks in that graph. There's no starts and stops like when you get to piecewise stuff. Then the range is bottom to top. And the range here would also be negative infinity to positive infinity because it goes as low as it can go to as high as it can go. If it is cut off by the edges of your graph, you assume it would continue on beyond that. Number 3 says find the values of x for which f of x equals 0. This is the same thing as saying y is 0 at your x-intercepts, which happen here, and those x values are 0 and 3. If it had asked for the x-intercepts, I would have put that in coordinate point form. It would have been 0, 0, and 3, 0. But because it said find the values of x for which f of x equals 0, that's why I'm only listing the x values. Number 4 says state which of the intervals the graph is increasing or decreasing. So remember, we do this in interval notation, and we use the x values again. As I go from left to right, I start with this first little swoop, right? And that is decreasing. So it is decreasing from negative infinity to the x there, which is 0. A point cannot be decreasing, so it always gets a parentheses. Then it changes direction and it goes back up again. And that would be from 0 to 2, and that is increasing. And then it goes back down again all the way to the end of the graph, which means it is decreasing again from 2 to positive infinity. Yep. You're always doing x coordinates or x values when you're doing increasing, decreasing behavior. Yep. Then it says state all the relative max or minimum values. The min here, or a relative min, when it goes down and comes back up again, is 0, 0. And the max, it goes up and comes back down again, would be 2, 4. Again, if it asks for what's the maximum value at that, I would also have taken the y's there because I feel like the language there is a little bit obscure. But if it had said when does the max happen, it's asking for the x. What is the max? It's asking for the y. Usually when it says find the minimum and the maximum of the graph, you're looking for the coordinate point. Okay, but I would have taken either one there. If this was me, I may do 5 before I do 4 because 5. The min and the max are where your interval notation is going to start and stop for your increasing and decreasing. So how you choose to do that order is up to you. But if I know that it changes, if it's a minimum, it's changing from decreasing to increasing, right? And if it's a maximum, it's changing from increasing to decreasing. So you can use those points to help you identify your max and your min, especially on the graphing calculator one, because those are not as easy to spot. Questions on this one? All right, then we get to the piecewise function. So it says graph the piecewise function. Where x is less than 1, my function is x squared. X squared is a parabola. Again, we're going to get in a little bit more of this today. But if I didn't know those coordinate points, I could literally plug in and I would start with 1 and then I would go less than 1. So if I plug in 1, I get 1. If I plug in 0, I get 0. And if I plug in 1, I get 1. And I know my parabola looks like this, or something similar to that. Now the values are only where it's less than 1, so none of this counts. I'm going to erase all of that. And less than means this dot is open. Then it says that it is 3 from 1 to 3. If it's y equals 3, we're talking a horizontal line. It is always 3 from 1 to 3. That would be, it would actually continue on beyond that if I didn't just restrict it. But also, it's less than 3, not equal to 3. So the 1 gets the open dot and the 3 gets the solid dot. And then the last one would be y equals negative x plus 6, where x is greater than or equal to 3. So if I wanted to use my y-intercept, it would start at 3. No, sorry, it would start at 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It would start at 6, and my slope would be negative 1. So I'd go down 1 into the right one, and it doesn't start until x is 3. So it actually doesn't start till here. And then it would point on to the right, and I would make sure I erased any other point. Double check your answer at the end. Does it pass your vertical line test? If it doesn't, then you know you did something wrong. There should be no overlapping points. If there are two x values that have different y values, one of them must be open. Both of them can be open, but one of them has to be open. Questions? Yeah.
How is your constant going all the way, going over 4? It's going from
1, 2, 3. I just went too far.
Oh.
Sorry. Which means I didn't start the other one early enough either, right? Because then this should be 3. So this should actually go like this. Now we're good. Yeah. Thank you. Other questions? Okay. Then came the graphing utility question, okay? And I would say that this is when, and this is how you're going to start your test. So you definitely don't want to be uncomfortable with your graphing calculator and have it rattle you for the rest of the time. First of all, you should be comfortable enough that this is a smooth process. Second of all, if you get hung up, you need to stop, move on, and come back to it, okay? But this is going to have multiple parts, so it's going to be worth a good chunk of points. You got to make sure you're comfortable with your calculator. It says use the graphing utility to graph the function and find the following information. So the first thing I'm going to do is graph it. It starts with a leading negative, which means I have to use the little guy above the or below the 3, or it will give you an error. If your calculator gives you an error on the day of the test and you call me over and you're like, it's giving me an error, I cannot help you. You have to know what to do there. That's why it's one of the reasons why I made this one a negative at the beginning, so you get that experience. Okay, so again, we started with a negative at the front, but this negative, not this negative, and then I hit graph. Your test is going to do the same thing as your quiz, where it's going to give you a little coordinate grid if you want to draw a little representation of your graph. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it will help you answer the other questions. So I would say draw it if you can. So for that, I would want to know where my zeros are, and I would want to know where my maximum and my minimum values are, okay? If I'm doing increasing and decreasing, like I said before, I would start with my max and min. I would try those first. So I would say second trace, I'm going to go to the max. There's a max. There's 2 of them. There's one here, so I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to go to the right of it. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to hit enter again. And it's going to bring me to the maximum value, which is negative 1.171 and 7.285. I'm going to write that down. That's one of my maximums, okay? Then I'm going to do it again. Second trace. I'm going to go to the other maximum. Left of it, right of it, guess, and there's my other one, 0.907, and 9.134. And yes, if you round wrong, you're going to lose points, so you want to be careful. And then the minimum, negative 0.235 and 4.643. The other thing I'm going to get while I'm here is my zeros. So second trace, go to my first 0. So I have to go all the way left, right, and bring it straight there. It says negative 1.7747. And my y is 1.1 e to the negative 12th. That means there are 12 zeros in front of that first one, which means this is 0. So my 0, well, my intercept would be that. My 0 is just negative 1.774. I don't want the 0 part. because I'm listing the X values. And then I'm gonna do the other one, second trace, go to 0. Go all the way, go past it. And my second 0 is 1.531. And again, it says 1.7e negative 12, but that's just 0. All right, so then from that image, so let me actually just pull in the image, because this is what I would want to, I'd want to be able to duplicate this roughly on the test, because I'll give you a blank coordinate grid. So if I was drawing this out, it doesn't have to, again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but at least it would help me to label those points, because that's going to help you with your increasing and decreasing behavior. My domain, these arrows go left to right, which means my domain is negative infinity to positive infinity. And the range, it starts at negative infinity, but then where does it stop? What's the highest? Y. This point up here, which came from my maximum point, 9.134. And it gets a bracket because that's a solid dot. So then I already have my relative max and min, my increasing, decreasing behavior. So it starts increasing. It's going to be increasing from negative infinity to that first X value, which is negative 1.171. Then it turns and it comes down a little bit. So it's decreasing from negative 1.171 to the minimum value there. And the X on the minimum is negative 0.235. And then it comes back up again here, which means it's increasing again from negative 0.235. And it stops increasing at the maximum 0.907. And then it decreases again here, which is that 0.907. And it goes on to positive infinity. And then the last thing it asks for is your f of 3.5. So for that, we're going to go to the calculate menu. We go to we go to the calculate menu, we go to value, and we type in 3.5. And you get negative 446.938. Always 3 decimal places unless it says otherwise. How did I get what? You go to second trace and go to value, and then enter in 3.5. Questions?